I am Dr. Claire Monroe, a urologist specializing in male hormonal health. Over the last several years in my clinical practice, I have observed a deeply concerning trend among men in their late 40s and 50s who come into my office quietly devastated by the sudden and seemingly inexplicable loss of their morning erections and their physical spontaneity. They sit in the consultation chair, deeply confused, telling me that their testosterone levels are supposedly normal. They exercise regularly, and they eat reasonably well, yet their bodies are entirely unresponsive. What almost none of these men realize, until we sit down and trace back their medical history, is that they are actively inducing this chemical castration themselves every single morning. They are doing it by swallowing one of two incredibly common, heavily prescribed cosmetic medications designed to stop hair loss. Today, I am going to explain exactly how these two medications, finasteride and dutasteride, are quietly dismantling the biological foundation of your masculine vitality. I will walk you through the precise mechanism of how they starve your erectile tissue of the specific hormone it requires to function, and I will give you the clinical protocols necessary to begin rehabilitating your hormonal axis and restoring your physical confidence before the damage to your blood vessels becomes a permanent structural reality. If you are currently taking a daily pill to preserve your hairline, or if you have noticed a severe decline in your bedroom performance after starting one of these treatments, you are facing a very specific, chemically induced biological crisis. Hundreds of thousands of men are currently experiencing this exact same loss of physical responsiveness, yet they endure it silently, completely unaware that the cosmetic prescription sitting on their bathroom counter is the direct biological cause. They blame their age, they blame their stress levels, and they often end up chasing synthetic performance pills that stop working after a few months. By the end of our session today, you will have a clear, unvarnished medical understanding of exactly what these hair preservation medications are doing to your internal architecture, and you will possess the clinical knowledge required to reverse this trajectory, a level of detail that the physicians prescribing these cosmetic pills almost never take the time to explain to you. To understand why a pill designed to keep hair on your head is shutting down your physical function below the waist, we have to look past the marketing and examine the actual endocrinology of the male body. Finasteride and dutasteride belong to a class of drugs called 5-alpha reductase inhibitors. When you consume them, their sole biological purpose is to seek out and neutralize an enzyme in your body called 5-alpha reductase. This enzyme is incredibly important because it is responsible for converting your circulating testosterone into a much more potent, much more aggressive androgen called dihydrotestosterone, commonly known as DHT. The cosmetic and pharmaceutical industries have spent decades painting DHT as the enemy, labeling it as a trash hormone that does nothing but enlarge your prostate and cause your hair follicles to miniaturize and fall out. Because of this narrative, men willingly take these medications to crush their DHT levels to near zero, believing they are simply saving their hair without any systemic consequences. This is a fundamental misunderstanding of male biology, and it is a biologically dangerous assumption. DHT is not a useless byproduct. It is the most potent male androgen in your entire body, estimated to be up to 5 times more powerful than testosterone itself when binding to your androgen receptors. While it does affect your scalp, DHT is absolutely critical for the health, maintenance, and daily function of your neurological system, your libido, and most importantly, the smooth muscle tissue inside your pelvic region. Your erectile tissue is densely packed with androgen receptors that specifically crave DHT. When your brain sends an arousal signal down your spinal cord, it relies on the presence of DHT to trigger an enzyme called nitric oxide synthase. This is the enzyme that actually produces the nitric oxide gas required to relax your blood vessels, dilate your arteries, and allow the massive surge of blood necessary to create a firm, reliable erection. When you take finasteride or dutasteride for years on end, you systematically starve your pelvic region of this crucial hormone. Without adequate DHT, the nitric oxide synthase pathway becomes severely blunted. Your brain can send all the arousal signals it wants, and you can have perfectly normal baseline testosterone. But without DHT to act as the biochemical key, the physical mechanism of vasodilation simply will not occur. This is precisely why men on these medications slowly lose their morning wood, why their erections become incredibly difficult to maintain, and why they experience a profound, almost anesthetic numbness in their physical desire. You are trading the foundational hormone of your male vitality for the preservation of cosmetic hair follicles. And you are doing so at the exact age when your natural hormonal production is already beginning to decline. The conventional medical approach often ignores this systemic trade-off. When men complain about these side effects, many doctors simply dismiss it as psychological or offer a prescription for a synthetic performance pill, completely ignoring the fact that you cannot force blood into a tissue that has been chemically stripped of the hormone it needs to function. Rehabilitating your physical responsiveness after prolonged exposure to these 5-alpha reductase inhibitors requires a highly strategic approach to your hormonal health. You cannot simply stop the medication abruptly and expect your body to magically reset overnight. I am going to outline 3 specific clinical steps you must take to begin restoring your androgenic sensitivity and protecting your erectile tissue from further atrophy. The first and most critical step is addressing the ongoing systemic suppression of your hormones. You must have a serious, informed conversation with the physician who prescribed the hair loss medication about transitioning away from oral systemic inhibitors. The clinical reality is that swallowing a pill subjects your entire endocrine system, your brain, and your pelvic floor to severe DHT deprivation. If preserving your hair remains a priority, the clinical alternative is shifting to localized topical treatments that do not drastically alter your systemic blood serum levels of DHT. Formulations utilizing topical minoxidil combined with extremely low-dose, localized androgen blockers can often maintain hair follicles without crossing the blood-brain barrier or flooding your systemic circulation in the way oral finasteride does. By removing the systemic chemical block, you allow your liver and your testes to slowly resume the natural conversion of testosterone into DHT, which is the absolute prerequisite for reawakening the nitric oxide pathway in your physical response. The second step in this rehabilitation protocol involves deliberately upregulating your endogenous testosterone production to overwhelm the suppressed pathways and wake up your dormant androgen receptors. When your body has been starved of DHT for years, the receptors in your pelvic tissue often downregulate, meaning they become less sensitive to the hormones you do have. To reverse this, you must introduce a powerful physiological stimulus. The most effective clinical method for this is specific, heavy resistance training focused entirely on your lower body and major muscle groups. I am not referring to casual jogging or light cycling. I am referring to heavy squats, deadlifts, and compound movements performed with adequate intensity. This type of severe mechanical stress on your largest muscle groups triggers a massive, acute release of luteinizing hormone from your pituitary gland, which in turn signals your testes to drastically increase total testosterone production. By intentionally flooding your system with higher levels of natural testosterone, you provide your body with the raw material it needs to naturally synthesize more DHT as the chemical inhibitors slowly leave your system, effectively forcing your androgen receptors to wake up and respond. Before we move on to the third step, which involves directly intervening in the vascular pathways that have been damaged by this hormonal suppression, I want to take a brief moment to ask for your support. This specific conversation regarding the devastating sexual side effects of cosmetic hair medications is heavily suppressed and often completely ignored by the mainstream industry. If you value this kind of unvarnished clinical truth, and if you want to ensure that more men hear this information before they permanently compromise their physical function, please subscribe to the channel and leave a like on this video. Your engagement is the only way we can bypass the noise and get this vital medical information to the men who are silently struggling and desperately looking for answers. The third step in restoring your physical confidence is bypassing the suppressed hormonal pathway entirely and forcing your endothelial cells to produce nitric oxide through dietary nitrate conversion. Because the hair loss pills have damaged your DHT-dependent nitric oxide production, you must use a secondary biological backdoor to keep the erectile tissue oxygenated while your hormones recover. The clinical protocol here requires the daily consumption of high-concentration dietary nitrates, specifically from raw beets, arugula, and dark leafy greens, combined with a severe reduction in antiseptic mouthwashes. The bacteria on the back of your tongue are responsible for converting these plant nitrates into nitrites, which your stomach acid then converts into nitric oxide. If you are using harsh, alcohol-based mouthwashes every morning, you are killing the microbiome required for this conversion. By protecting your oral microbiome and consuming these specific nitrate-rich foods heavily in the afternoon, you provide your vascular system with the raw materials to create vasodilation independently of your suppressed DHT levels. This keeps the blood vessels in your pelvic region active, pliable, and fed with oxygen, preventing the physical tissue from undergoing apoptosis, which is the permanent cellular death that occurs when erectile tissue goes too long without regular blood flow. As a medical professional, I have guided many men through the complex process of weaning off systemic hair medications and rebuilding their natural physical function through these strict lifestyle and physiological interventions. However, the clinical reality is that when a man's endocrine system has been chemically suppressed for 5, 10, or even 15 years, dietary changes and exercise alone are often not enough to restart the central hormonal axis efficiently. The communication loop between the brain and the testes becomes incredibly sluggish. Because of this clinical gap, I spent months reviewing the scientific literature to find natural, deeply researched compounds that could safely and effectively stimulate this specific hormonal pathway without the severe side effects of synthetic hormone replacement therapy. I needed a formulation that targeted the exact biological deficits caused by prolonged androgen suppression. This research led me to a specific natural combination that I now consistently include in my clinical recovery protocols for men dealing with hormonal blunting. This formulation utilizes tribulus, a highly researched botanical compound that directly stimulates the release of luteinizing hormone, signaling the testes to rapidly increase their endogenous testosterone production, providing the exact raw material your body needs to rebuild its DHT reserves. It pairs this with maca, a profound adaptogen that regulates the central hormonal axis from the brain, restoring the libido and neurological desire that are so often destroyed by 5-alpha reductase inhibitors, doing so without artificially manipulating your prostate. This is not a pharmaceutical drug, and it is not a temporary synthetic performance enhancer. It is a comprehensive nutritional rehabilitation tool designed to rebuild the communication between your brain and your physical function. I have placed the link to this exact formulation in the pinned comment directly below this video. I encourage you to click through, read the clinical science behind these specific ingredients, and evaluate how they work to restore the pathways that have been shut down. I have observed excellent, sustained recovery in men who combine this targeted hormonal support with the specific physical and dietary habits we have outlined today. It is absolutely crucial to look at this conversation not just as a debate about hair versus performance, but as a window into the long-term reality of your male vitality. When a man ignores the loss of his morning erections, when he accepts a numb libido as just a normal part of getting older while continuing to swallow a cosmetic pill, he is allowing his pelvic tissue to slowly die. Morning wood is not just about sexual readiness. It is a biological maintenance mechanism. It is your body's way of forcing highly oxygenated blood into the delicate tissues of the pelvic region to keep the smooth muscle cells alive and elastic. When you chemically eliminate those nocturnal erections through DHT suppression, the smooth muscle begins to undergo fibrosis. It literally turns into rigid scar tissue. Over a period of years, this leads to irreversible physical shrinkage, venous leakage, and an absolute inability to perform, regardless of how much synthetic medication you take later in life. The men who maintain their physical authority, their vigor, and their deep masculine confidence into their 60s and 70s are the men who understand this physiological reality. They are the men who refuse to trade their core biological function for a cosmetic illusion, and they take decisive, disciplined action to protect their hormonal integrity long before the damage becomes permanent. To summarize our clinical discussion today, the severe loss of physical responsiveness and morning erections you are experiencing is not a mystery, nor is it strictly an age-related decline. It is the direct biological consequence of taking finasteride or dutasteride, which aggressively starve your body of DHT, the exact hormone your pelvic tissue requires to produce nitric oxide and maintain vascular elasticity. By transitioning away from systemic oral inhibitors, forcing your body to upregulate natural testosterone through heavy mechanical stress, and supporting your vascular health with dietary nitrates, you can begin to wake up your dormant androgen receptors and restore the physical function that has been chemically suppressed. I want to hear from you regarding your own experiences with these medications and their subtle side effects. Tell me in the comments. Have you noticed a distinct change in your physical responsiveness or your overall drive since starting any treatments for hair preservation? Take a moment to leave your observation below. It is incredibly important for the thousands of men reading these comments to realize that they are not losing their minds, and that this silent chemical suppression is a shared reality for so many. As we conclude this session, I want you to seriously consider the actual cost of complacency when it comes to your endocrine health. Continuing to suppress your most potent masculine hormone while hoping your physical performance will somehow magically improve is not a strategy. It is biological negligence. The unpredictability in your response and the total loss of spontaneous morning firmness are your body actively warning you that the tissue is suffocating and requires immediate intervention. The protocol we discussed today provides the foundation for stopping the damage. But if you want to aggressively target the sluggish communication between your brain and your natural testosterone production, I strongly recommend reviewing the clinical formulation I mentioned earlier. It is designed to act as a powerful adjunct to your recovery, providing the targeted signaling your body desperately needs to restart its internal engine. You will find the link waiting for you in the pinned comment below. Take the time to access it, read through the science, and make an informed decision about the future of your vitality. Waiting does not protect your pride. It just delays the solution. Thank you for your time, your focus, and your commitment to your health today. I will see you in our next session.